Okay, so getting started with today's class, and all right. So the last class we discussed the theory and the approach and the requirements of the composition task, and we talked about the writing process. By the way, I'm sorry. Can you hear me just fine? And can you see my screen? I have the whiteboard open. Okay. Okay. So that's what we did the last time. Now, today, right, we're going to cover a bit of grammar, which is important for the writing skills that we have, the writing skills requirement. And right, we're going to talk about, start off with subject verb agreement. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let me just put that up. And if you have any questions, of course, you can just ask. Are you familiar with subject verb agreement in grammar? Yes, no, not much. Okay. So of course, like I haven't, seen any writing of yours, so I don't know how well you fare. But this is one of it's very simple, but it's also very important. And this is one of the grammatical aspects that students tend to get wrong often, and that really affects the quality of the writing, which is unfortunate, right? So subject verb agreement basically, right, for a sentence, right, any sentence which is a complete sentence, we know that the basic requirement for a sentence to be a complete sentence is subject and a verb, right? I'm not putting an object because that depends on the kind of verb, right? And we'll be going into uh, technicalities. And also, right, you can put in prepositions and adjectives and adverbs and all of that. But the basic requirement you have is having a subject and a verb, right? For example, I read, and that is a complete sentence. Okay, you've got your subject, you've got your verb, you've got a complete sentence. Now, the verb is obviously, in the 8 parts of speech in the English language, verb is one of them. Do you know which part of speech the subject belongs to? Because a subject is not a part of speech, right? But it's going to be the word that you use for the subject. Can you tell me which part of speech it belongs to? Yes? Like, take a guess, or like you don't know. I'm sure you'll know it. It's not like you wouldn't. Yeah, the subject is not a part of speech. What part of speech makes the subject? Like, you've got adjectives, you've got adverbs, you've got conjunctions, you've got verbs, you've got nouns and pronouns, you've got conjunctions. So which of these is used as the subject? Okay, so a name or something like IVU. So to put that in proper term, right, you can like it's either a noun or a pronoun, right? So you do know, you just didn't have that right exact term. So the subject would either be a noun or a pronoun. Okay. And for nouns and pronouns, so let's just stick to nouns first. We know that they can be singular or plural. Right? So for example, you've got the noun book, and so the plural will be books, right? Right, you've got right now, obviously you need to know, right? Some are simple, you just add an S or ES or IES. Some are more like the right different, like child and children, right? Perhaps candy and candies. So you got an IES coming over there, or bus and buses. So you've got an ES coming over there. But like we know, nouns are, they have a singular and plural form, right? And so right, the singular form and the plural form. So with the plural, we can say that, right, it is the word, the noun, plus S or ES or IES, right? And in the singular form, it is without that, right? So there's no S or ES or IES in addition, right? So the S over here in bus, it's part of the actual words. You won't remove that. It won't be like boo, right? Just a BU. And right, so what's being added over is ES. So it's pretty simple. Now the question is, right? So this is about nouns. And so you get the idea that subject verb agreement has something to do with being singular or plural. Now, because it's subject verb agreement, right? You've probably caught on to what this means. All right, let's talk about verbs. So on the same note, a verb. Oops. Pen. Right. So a verb. Can a verb be singular and plural? Can it? Well, because the topic is subject verb agreement, and we don't know this, but right, a verb can be singular and plural. Now, in terms of nouns, when we talk about singular and plural, that means that singular means one and plural means more than one. So that makes sense, right? You've got one book, you've got more than one book. Right, in terms of a verb, when we talk about singular and plural, it's not that we are doing something and then we're doing more of something. So singular and plural, because verbs talk about actions or states, but like, let's keep that to actions. So we're doing something or we're doing more of something. It's not like that. It is the singular and plural form of the verb is basically again to right be compatible with the noun, right? And what's the difference over here? For example, right, the singular, right? I'll just say it. So it's the verb plus the S, ES or IES, and the plural is without. Okay, and so that's something to keep in mind. It's kind of the opposite of a noun. So how does this work? For example, you've got read, right? And so the singular will be reads, the plural will be read, and we'll do some sentences and that will make more sense, right? Or something like walks and walk, or studies and, right, study, or something with a, right? And so you can see there's an S or an IES over here in the singular form, and there's nothing like that in the plural form. Okay, now, right, the agreement and right comes in that when we are using the sentence has, there are some exceptions to this, but let's get the basics right first. That when we have the sentence has a singular noun, a singular subject, sorry, which is a noun or a pronoun, then the verb that you're going to use will also be in the singular, right? And so singular subject and singular verb. And when the subject is plural, right? So singular form. Again, right? The verb being singular or plural does not mean that you're doing more of something or you're doing less of something. And then the plural subject plus plural form of verb. Any questions so far? We're going to do some examples to clarify this, but is like the concept clear? Any questions about the concept? Okay. Now, like I said, are you saying that this is basic grammar? It is basic grammar, right? It's just that when students get to doing it, they do it wrong because they're not paying attention when doing it, right? And very often they make mistakes of this kind. So, okay. Right. For example, the child reads a book every day. Right now, focus is obviously on the subject and the verb, right? So the subject is singular, and so the verb is also, right? You've got the subject and the verb, and the verb is also singular. Now, if I make this the children, right? And so that would become read a book every day. Right? So that's just one example. And so you can take it, right? Maybe any of these, right? Right? That candy, so that's singular, tastes sour, right? And then those candies taste sour, right? And so this one is singular, and so you got the es with the taste, right? Or the s, and candy is plural, and so you don't have that s with the verb, right? And so this is something because, again, right, from my experience as a teacher, right, the students would write the candy's tastes or the candy taste, right? And so they mess it up, and that's a problem. Now, this is for when the subject is a noun. What about when we're dealing with pronouns? right? So he, she, right? It, and like these are singular, and they, them, we, us, and right, these are plural. And I is, although it's a singular, but it's treated as a plural. I and you. So, so if we just try that out with some sentences. Uh, right? He takes the bus to work, right? Or she takes, like whatever you prefer, right? And so he is singular, and so takes, right, is singular. And they take the bus to work. Now this is straightforward, right? Because they is obviously plural. Or we take the bus to work. And right, so the I and the you, the I or you take the bus to work. And so the right, the one that stands out over here is the I and you, because even though they're singular, the verb that's going to come with them is going to be plural. So that's just something to keep in mind. Again, this is something very simple, as I said, and you like you did as well. Something very simple, something very basic, and still students, get it wrong when they're writing. So just like, and if you just like keep this in mind when you're working, right? This simple and basic grammar rule, if you get it right, will really help improve the quality of your writing. It seems odd, like, but yeah, the fact that it is that simple and that basic will show, okay, fine, so this student knows the basic principles of writing, and they got it correct. So, right, hopefully, like there are no questions about that. If there are, you can ask, and if not, then I can move on to another topic. Acha, one thing that I just remembered, this whole thing, right, is basically applicable to the present tense of the verb, right? It's not so much applicable to the past tense. And also it's applicable to helping verbs, right? So is, am, and are. So is is singular, are is plural, am is always used with the I, right? And for example, has and have, right? Or was. Now this is past, but was and were, right? So that's singular and plural. So helping verbs and the present tense of verbs, right? So it doesn't work with the past tense. So keep that in mind. So it's only when you're writing something in these tenses or these helping words where the subject verb agreement is applicable. Okay, if you're writing something in the past tense, right? So it would be he took the bus, and we took the bus, and I took the bus. Right? So it's all the same. There's only one form in the past tense. Okay. Okay, what's next? Sentence types. Okay. So, right, again, something very basic. You have four types of sentences. One is the declarative, you can just call statement. Then you've got the interrogative, right, which is a question. The third is an imperative, right, which is either a command or a request. And the fourth is exclamatory, right, which basically is a sentence that has an exclamation mark at the end. Right, now, why do you need to know these? Again, right, in your writing, you'll be most likely using, yeah, you'll definitely be using this. So this is going to be the majority of your writing, but you may need or want to use questions, or in a narrative or something, right? You might use an imperative. And so again, right, you need to know how that works. So a declarative is any sentence that is just basically stating something, it's giving information, right? And for example, right, that orange cat is mine, right? It's a very simple sentence. I'm not trying to like make elaborate sentences at the moment, right? And so this is a declarative sentence. It ends with a full stop, right? And you're just giving a statement. It's just information, sure, right? And so yeah, the full stop is obviously, right? You change this into an interrogative, right? And so, for example, whose orange cat is that? Right, now, how to form a question if you got any like you need some elaboration on how to form a question sentence, right? Let me know. An imperative is a command or a request. So, for example, right, give me the orange cat, right? I don't know what kind of situation that would be, right? Where someone's commanding you to give the cat, but anyway, right? Or, right, this is a command, or like, please give me the orange cat. So that would be a request. And an exclamatory sentence is one where there's a show of emotion, and right, there's an exclamation mark. And so it, and also it doesn't need to be like a full on sentence, right? Something like, that's an orange cat. Right now, again, we're not talking about the context where this would be like, it would be said this way. It's right, the type of sentence that we're working with. And so, right, these are the four sentence types uh, that the English language has and that you need to have an understanding of. It's going to help you in your narratives, definitely, in your descriptive writings, possibly. Sorry, not descriptive writing, your dieted writings, possibly. And yeah, any questions about this, or like should I move on? Right, today's class is right, more grammar based. It's simple, but I feel that this is something I review in my classes, right, and something that students need to have reviewed so they can work better on their papers. So, any questions about this one? Okay. And as I did share the criteria of the marks, the marking with you, you can see that proper grammar and proper sentence structure and all of that is a criteria that is seen, is checked for your grading in the exam. And so these are things that a student needs to know and needs to keep in mind. Okay, what else do we have? We've done subject verb agreement, we've done sentence types. Next up is sentence structure. Okay, so in terms of structure, right, in terms of having a subject and having a verb and giving that information, the level of complexity of a sentence, right, there are like three levels of, right, there are three different structures. Technically there are four, but generally there are three structures to a sentence. Right, the first is a simple sentence. The second is a compound sentence. And the third is complex. Okay. And before we get into this, just like we need to talk about what is a clause and what is a phrase. Right? And so grammatically, a clause is a sentence, or you can say, let me is part of a sentence with a subject and a verb, right? And a phrase is part of a sentence without a subject or verb or both. Right? It doesn't have either a subject or a verb. Now, as far as clauses go, there are two further subtypes, right? One is an independent clause, and the other is a dependent clause, right? And this will come into play, obviously, in the structures. And so what does that mean? Right, so a clause is a part of a sentence with a subject and a verb, sure. An independent clause, right, it gives complete meaning, right? So it is part of a sentence with a subject and a verb, and it's giving you complete meaning, right? Which means it is a complete sentence. A dependent clause does not give complete meaning. Right, so it has a subject, it has a verb, it has both. You need to have both of them. But for some reason, and we'll come to that, it's still not giving complete meaning. Okay? And right, so that will come into play with complex sentences. Achha, and a phrase, obviously, it's a part of a sentence without a subject or a verb or both, and so obviously, right, a phrase does not give complete meaning. It does give meaning, it doesn't give complete meaning. So it's not like it doesn't mean anything, it does. It's just it doesn't give you the whole, right? Now we have about like 5 minutes, so I'll just touch on simple sentence for today, if that's okay, right? And as the term is, simple sentence is simple, right? And a simple sentence is basically, right, the basic requirement of a sentence, which is subject and verb and object if required, and other details. I'm going to start over there, plus other details. So what are those other details? Those other details are, for example, right, you've put in adjectives or prepositions or whatever, as long as there is no conjunction in the sentence. Okay, so a simple sentence has a subject and verb and other details to go with it, as long as there is no conjunction. So, right, let's have another cat sentence, because that's something I had in mind, right, from another class. I'm just going to use that, right? And you can say something like the stray cat was meowing loudly outside my bedroom window at night. And you read the sentence, you're like, okay, fine. So this is a lot of detail, right? You've got the subject over here. You've got the verb over here. This is past continuous, right? The stray is an adjective, loudly is an adverb, outside is a preposition, right? At night is an, like, right? It's an you're giving detail about the time, and so there's a lot of detail going in. But you can see that there is no conjunction, right? And you are meeting the requirement of subject and verb, right? So that's the S, that's the V, right? The subject and verb requirement of a sentence is being met, and whatever detail you've included, there is no conjunction of any sort being used over here. And so this still qualifies as a simple sentence. Right? Now, when Cambridge in their marking scheme for writing says that varied use of different sentence structures, right? And so this still counts as a simple sentence. So they will give you credit that you were able to write a simple sentence, adding detail, and it's, you've got everything in place and it's properly written, and right? So you will get credit for that. You will get marks for that. But this still counts as a simple sentence. And in your writing, you want a mix of simple and compound, right? So that's something definitely you want. And the examiner really appreciates when you can add complex sentences properly. And so that is something we'll come to in our, uh, future classes, right? And so if you can manage that, and that is something the examiner appreciates, and they would, comment in, like, obviously they won't tell you, obviously, but the comments that I've seen where examiners say that the student was able to use complex sentences properly and accurately and all of that. And so that's a plus point. And so your writings should have a mix of those, especially your directed writing and your composition, right? Not so much in the summary, but right, your summary, even if they're like simple sentences and maybe compound sentences, not complex ones, they need to be proper, right? They need to be properly structured. And so again, right? So knowing the sentence structure and knowing how to write it out is important and something to keep in mind and something to practice when preparing for the exam. All right. So any questions? I'm going to stop there because if I won't be able to cover any material properly if I continue. There's like a minute and a half left. So any question about anything we did today? Okay, so right, that was theory of grammar, and hopefully that was helpful. And I'll see you again next Tuesday, inshallah. All right. And if you have any question before then, you can ask, and I'll be uploading the videos to right, so you'll be able to access them then. All right then. Fi amanillah.